He's a walking contradiction, a man whose towering physique belies the lows as well as highs he's experienced in a playing career that's brought relegation and self-doubt, along with the more than 200 senior goals he scored, the silverware and England caps won, not forgetting the nearly £50 million the clubs have spent to acquire his services. This is Football Today's Big Interview, a series that began by telling the life story of Michael Carrick, the Manchester United star, who always seemed destined for greatness from a young age. Well, our subject this time around is a man who's taken a far less obvious route to the top, but whose career has been every bit as enthralling.
I wasn't destined to be a Premier League player, I wasn't destined to be an England player.
He scored more Premier League goals than Ruud van Nistelrooy, Cristiano Ronaldo and Fernando Torres.
They don't fit the mould of a top footballer, but thankfully I've managed to prove those critics wrong.
He's got more Premier League assists than Ginola, Zola and Perez.
I still love it. I mean, I'm playing professional football. I'm going in every day and doing what I've always dreamed of doing.
He scored more Premier League goals with his head than any other player.
I'm very thankful for the career I've had. There was times where I didn't think it would happen.
He's played for 8 senior English clubs at a cost of over £43 million.
I've always enjoyed what I do and I've always done it with a smile on my face.
He's Peter Crouch.
He's Peter Crouch.
That's right, it's Crouchy.
Right, so I'm sitting here talking to one of the most recognisable England strikers of the last 15 years or so, someone who's played for his country, achieved an awful lot in Premier League football, but maybe an unlikely story, Peter, in some ways. Tell us a little bit about the fact that throughout your life, things have been a bit different from maybe the norm, starting with your childhood, even in your very young years. It wasn't exactly raised in England, was it?
No, I mean, I've moved about a lot in my career, to say the least. But yeah, obviously started early, even with school. I was born in Macclesfield. We moved to London. We went out to Singapore for 3 years when I was very, very young. Came back and then grew up in West London, Ealing, so QPR territory, and obviously that's where I started when I was 9 years old.
So QPR we'll come back to very shortly, but obviously, it was sort of around the London scene, the West London scene, if you will. Was football something that you always had your sights set on doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously my dad was so passionate about football and, took me at a very young age, and obviously we grew up in Ealing, West London. It was QPR or Chelsea. My dad was a massive Chelsea fan, and he took me to the games when I was a kid. I was actually a ball boy at Chelsea for years and years. And I always remember, obviously, they tried to get me down there, but I ended up staying with QPR.
That's interesting, because obviously as your career pans out, your affections and your allegiances, fans always think they know, don't they? Oh, he was at Chelsea once, wasn't he? Has that ever been a problem for you?
Yeah. No, not at all. No, like I say, as a kid, I used to go to Chelsea, and I had a rabbit called Kerry Dixon, believe it or not. Yeah, they were good times, great times, obviously. And when I was old enough to sort of go to the matches on my own, I used to go to QPR, and it was £5 to go in the lower paddock in those days to watch a Premier League game. And in those days, QPR were the top London club. So it was great going down there, getting the tube to White City from Ealing Broadway. It were good days.
Who were the heroes, the idols back then?
Roy Wegley, Gary Penrice, Trevor Sinclair. Roy Wegley was my hero. I loved Roy Wegley. He was a legend. That was obviously when we were a little bit older. Obviously, Les Ferdinand, another QPR legend.
Yeah, we'll come back to Les very, very shortly. Let's get the height thing out the way. Your dad's tall. How soon in life was it obvious that you were going to be taller than the most of the other lads?
I think right from school, to be honest. I think in a way it was a blessing the way I had my height. I was always ahead above everyone else at school, so it wasn't the case of me just shooting up and not being able to deal with it. I've always been the tallest person around, and it was something that I grew up with and something that I had to get used to very quickly. And I think maybe it's made me the person that I am. Obviously having to deal with this and that, and do it with a smile on my face. And I've always been the tallest, and it's something that I've enjoyed and I relish, and that I wouldn't change for the world.
Well, you say it's a help, but I mean, I just wonder if it could have been a hindrance. I wonder if you could have been typecast, even in a football context. I wonder if sometimes, I remember reading somewhere that your dad would get angry that people would, judge you, perhaps before they didn't see you play.
No, exactly right. Yeah, I mean, I think it was more a hindrance than anything. people would say that I was older than the other kids. If I'd scored, obviously in the youth games at school, or I played for West Middlesex Colts. I scored like a hat trick or 4 goals or something, and I remember the mums and dads always used to say that I was older because I was taller, and obviously that wasn't the case. And I think you could have told by how skinny I was as a kid, and still am, that I wasn't. I certainly wasn't older than the other kids, and obviously that progressed from there. And I had people saying to me that eventually I'd be moved back to centre half because of my height, but that was never the case. I always wanted to score goals. I always wanted to play up front.
And that's interesting as well, in that in terms of the way you played. You said you were always taller, so presumably you played football with the ball at your feet, and you didn't play like a tall guy, as it were. You didn't feel that you had to just hit the ball, or you had to just play in such a way that you used your advantages physically.
Well, as a kid, you don't know. You just think you're the same as everyone else. I wanted to emulate Paul Gascoigne or Maradona, or I don't think you grow up wanting to head the ball constantly. You want to be technical, and that's the same for me. And my dad was very big on that. And as a kid, I used to go to Corva soccer schools, and I used to work on my technique and my first touch. And my dad bought like 10 balls, and we used to jump over a Hamwell Town football club. I don't know if I should be saying that really, but we used to jump over the fence, and he used to wrap balls into me before school and after school. And I used to enjoy it. I used to love it, and I think it was all about technique and ability, and obviously the heading and stuff like that had to come, because being 6'7", if you can't head the ball, it's something that I had to work on really. But the technique side of it was something that I really enjoyed doing.
Okay, what about finding your way into it? Because obviously you talked about QPR there, but it wasn't as if you hit the ground running. You were part of a loan. You found yourself in Sweden. I mean, there was Dulwich for a while, then there was Sweden with that Alton Thirlwell deal with John Johnson. Johnson coming the other way, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Where are they now, by the way?
Well, Alton, actually, I speak to Alton. I see him every now and then, and I went out to Sweden with him. He's a personal trainer now, believe it or not, but very good lad, and we had the best time ever. Obviously, went over to Sweden as
How old were you then?
As young lads, 17. But yeah, I mean, I was at Tottenham, and there were so many players ahead of me, and I was a young lad, 17 years old, and I had Les Ferdinand, Chris Armstrong, Stefan Everson, Paul McVeigh, Neil Fenn. These were all players that were ahead of me, and I wasn't even getting the game for the reserves. So I made the decision to go out to Sweden to get some first team football, and it was the best thing I ever did.
So Tottenham didn't work then. Obviously, it was always going to be a tall order. We'll come back to Tottenham a little bit later on. So when things did start to happen, Queen's Park Rangers, Jerry Francis. So talk us through that.
Yeah, well, that was it. I mean, believe it or not, I was at QPR as a 9-year-old, and Des Bulpin, who works with Jerry Francis wherever he's been, and obviously when Jerry was at Tottenham, Des said to Jerry that, I've got a player here I'd come through the youth team with Des, and he's a huge influence on my career, really. He said to come down to QPR, and Jerry took a chance on me, really. I think they paid 60 grand for me as a 19-year-old, I think I was then. And then again, the same thing happened. I went to QPR, and I thought, well, I'm not gonna play this season, but hopefully I'll impress enough to get a few games off the bench. And I remember Rob Steiner, Chris Kawamya, the centre forwards at the time, all got injured, and I was basically thrown in. It's the first day, pre-season I'd done okay, and then Birmingham City at home was my league debut, and I went on to have a really good season. And
was that debut off the bench, or?
No, I started against Birmingham, and then I had a couple of sub appearances, and then I went in. I think it was Barnsley away where we lost, but I did really well. I came off the bench a couple of times, and I scored and set up one against Gillingham, which I'll always remember. And
it's just the famous one where you smashed one in, but it looked as if you might have been falling over.
Yeah, I think I actually did slip, believe it or not. And I actually heard. I remember when I was coming on, I saw someone saying, in no uncertain terms, what are you bringing him on for? And I was a 19-year-old kid, and I was like, God, I need to do something now. And thankfully, the ball just dropped to me. I slipped. It looked like a dummy, but then I managed to lash on in. And I remember setting up Chris Kawamya for the second. We ended up drawing 2-2, and my confidence just grew from there. And I thought, right, actually, I can do this.
So once that started to happen, you were playing with the big boys then. What happened to your game? How much of a step up was it to be playing competitive football and no mucking around now?
Yeah, but in all honesty, confidence-wise, I felt that I had the ability. I always knew that, but I didn't feel that my body was sort of coming with me. Do you know what I mean? I was probably as tall as I am now, and probably 3 stone lighter than I am now, which is saying something, So I felt that it was holding me back, and I thought, am I going to be strong enough, for the man's game, and am I ready? But thankfully, I came in, and the fans took to me straight away, and I went on and scored a load of goals for QPR, and ended up with Player of the Year that year.